And if y'all want to just take a minute, introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about it, your business, and we've got a husband-wife team. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, your business, and then we'll just kick it off. We'll just go one after the other. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Vinson, and I'm co-owner of Viva Plant Shop with my wife, Iris. We opened a retail store near UTEP not that long ago, and so we've been in business for quite a few years, but new to the retail space.
Hello, my name is Alexia Maldonado. I am the owner and designer of a women's ready-to-wear clothing brand called Amaldeux. I opened up my business back in 2022, and here we are trying to expand the retail and fashion industry here in El Paso.
Hi, my name is Svoboda. I'm the electrician, plumber, trash taker-outer of 210 Coffee Roasters.
All right. Very good. Thank you all. Let's welcome our panel one more time if we could quickly. So in full disclosure, I am obviously of a different generation than all of you. Maybe not, I'm not sure why you're up here, quite honestly, Stephen. I'm thinking they said young people, and I'm thinking you and I may have went to high school together. I don't know. Did you go to high school here? Maybe we were in prison together. I don't remember. But anyway, either way, I don't think you should. So
I think it was prison.
It probably was. I'm not afraid to go back, so don't mess with me. But I can remember whenever I was a young businessman many, many years ago. I mean, literally 40 years ago when I first got into business. And it was a different world back then. And it's still big business. With businesses, there's a lot of things that are constantly changing. And I'm not saying that it was easier back in the olden days, as my kids would say, but it was different. And I think you're going to give us a lot of great insight on things that will help us, not just if we've got young entrepreneurs in the room or potential entrepreneurs, but also we're looking for things that might even help some of us who might be a little further along that we may not have learned in the old days that would help us be more effective and more efficient today, and maybe even in relating to those of you on that end, to the younger generation as well. And so if I could just ask all of you to answer this next question, and that is this, just from the start of your, what were some of the things that you were not expecting to be a challenge that have been a challenge for you? Like when you were thinking of starting your business, I never dreamed I'd have to deal with this. What might be some of those things? And then just one or two maybe, and then just briefly tell us how you overcame them or dealt with them. All right, we'll just start it down at the end again, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so, our business started kind of under unique circumstances as a mobile business. And so really over the last couple of years, we started in 2021. And so probably one of the biggest challenges we've learned is just how do you get your name out there? How do you let people know you're in business? And as a mobile business, I'm sure a lot of you know that can be challenging to just get your name out there and let people know you exist. And so, really for us as a mobile business with a small budget, especially at that time, really utilizing social media, I would say has been the biggest thing, because if you don't have a marketing budget or you have an incredibly low marketing budget, it's something that can be fairly low cost and make a big impact when it comes to just putting your business out there and yourselves out there. So, really that's one of the biggest lessons for us going from, especially a husband and wife owned business, is utilizing social media, learning how to, in the algorithms, like a whole different thing, but just, figuring out those challenges, how to get your name out there, what keywords can be used to advertise your business, especially with hashtags. And yeah, so we've just been, it's still something we're still learning today even, but that's really the biggest thing that helped us elevate as a mobile business at that time to get to where we're at now.
I think that it's exciting for people to know that there is something like this here in El Paso, that maybe they don't have to travel out of cities to, find these clothing brands that aren't fast fashion retail that you can normally find in the malls or other standalone stores that have been around for years. So getting my name out there as well is definitely something that I've been working on. And I do plan to stay in El Paso, so I think that this is something that can really grow as far as the fashion industry here in El Paso. So that's just something that we're kind of navigating so far, and hopefully doing a good job at it. But yeah, definitely still a lot to learn along the way.
All right, thank you so much. Steve.
For us, I would have to say in the beginning, and even to this day, it was people and money was the biggest challenge. Naturally, I'm in the coffee business, so for us, there was nothing in El Paso where you could buy fresh, locally roasted coffee. I think there might have been one or two outfits back 15 or 20 years ago. But for us, it was something, there was an opportunity, and being a sales guy, it's just grinding it out. There's no, as everybody knows, there's no special potion. It's a day in and day out grind. I've been doing it for 14 years now, and it hasn't gotten any easier. It's gotten harder. I don't think the challenges get easier. I think they get harder, but I think with time and experience of not quitting, my big thing is don't quit before the miracle.
All right, you got to explain that to us. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think that's the American dream, is at the end of the day is what is the miracle. Everyone has their different idea. I was just talking to David right now, Saucedo, about like, what do we think is considered rich? Everyone has their own idea. So if I dangle a carrot in front of my face day in and day out, some people's elevator might be at the 5th floor, the 40th floor. It all depends. So.
No, thank you for that. And I've actually had tell me my elevator doesn't go all the way to the top. I don't think that's what they're talking about, though. So let's go back the other way then. And so, Stephen, if I could ask you this, you talked about some of the challenges, and it is a daily grind. Like you said, you're everything. Of course, you sell legal, which I think is very interesting. But you talked about people as a challenge. Why don't you speak specifically to that? What are you referring to, and what have you done to overcome the people challenge in your business?
You're 100% correct. We sell legal drugs. That's the running joke in the office, because that's what we do. We started off, I was the only employee, and then we have 80, 90 people. So it's to build a team. So I started off small. I built my leadership team. I have people with me that have been there for 9 years, 8 years, 7 years, and it's the day in and day out conversation with them of trying to hire people with good values and working with them on a day in and day out basis. And then once we get to a certain point where they can then build their team and they hire, and I teach them those, and everything has to be measured. So we have matrices and KPIs to make sure we're all doing what we should be doing. But I mean, it's still a challenge to this day.
It really is. And as most of us know, the labor force is always a challenge, and it ebbs and flows, right, depending upon whether it's a hiring market or a working market. But that is something that's a challenge. I think especially for a small business to be able to attract quality people that you can build careers with. And some of the greatest organizations I've been able to be a part of, you've got people that have been together 20 or 30 years still working together. I think that's almost, in some ways, maybe in bygone years, but that would still be something that would be viable, I think, if we could make it happen. Alexia, if I could ask you a question, and that is, what is it, you've been in business a couple of years now, something that you know now that had you known before you actually got started might have helped you a lot, or maybe would even have you further along now? What might be something that had you known, that you know now, had you known at the beginning, would have helped you?
So, going into the manufacturing industry for any sort of product is always a challenge. You need to figure out what your right fit is going to be. And there's, different production companies that kind of specialize in different areas of fashion. Some may do swimwear, some may do strictly denim. So nobody really tells you where to go. You kind of have to go and do that research yourself and do a lot of trial and error processes. So personally for me, I started out in New York City, and I thought I was going to, just have my clothing manufactured there, and it was going to be a piece of cake afterwards. It did not go that way as I planned. And so I spent a year between going to New York and going to LA to have my clothing manufactured. That's currently where I have my clothing produced, and my business is still established here in El Paso. So I think definitely there's a lack of resources here in El Paso for that. And it kind of creates this barrier and a different kind of hardship to where people in other areas kind of have that advantage. So had someone told me, here's this place and talk to this person, like absolutely, it would have been a piece of cake. But just doing the research and failing essentially is what you need to do in order to grow. You need to go through those obstacles and figure out what techniques and what skills are going to benefit your business. So that's something that I've learned along the way.
All right, thank you so much. And this one's for you, Iris. We're going to make you talk. And by the way, she's local, so that's when we want to hear from her husband. He's from East Texas, way northeast Texas somewhere. But what I would ask you this question, Iris, along that same line, you're mobile to begin with, and now you're brick and mortar. What have been some of the challenges being brick and mortar that maybe you weren't expecting going brick and mortar? Have there been some things, and then maybe what are some of the advantages of being brick and mortar over being mobile?
I think some advantages and disadvantages would be that now being a brick and mortar, we're open more regularly. So inventory is a bigger obstacle. It's not just stocking inventory for a few events here and there. We're stocking for a whole store and a store that can be shopped on a regular basis. And we're also dealing with a living product, which is going to be a high rate of loss. So those are challenges that I've had to deal with, trying to figure out what that balance is, figuring out what my inventory needs to be, how much to buy as opposed to how little I was buying, and I could be more selective with things and have the more like high ticket items where I can't necessarily take that risk in a retail store where those high ticket items can possibly get lost due to pests or any other type of thing that I can't control.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to kind of shift gears just a little bit. As David mentioned, we're going to be a composite of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. And I have found that to be true over and over and over and over again. That was one of the principles my dad raised me with, and I have found it to be very true. And so if I think of that statement, as young entrepreneurs, we're going to get back to you all in just a minute. We're going to start with the sage on the stage right now. Stephen, on this particular question, though, what suggestion would you give to people who are starting a business or new into business as to, first of all, what to look for in maybe mentors or those people that are a little further down the road than you, people that you can, your nice, close network or your mastermind group, whatever you would call it. What should they look for in those people, first of all? And then secondly, how do you find those people that can be a mentor to you or help you get further down the road?
That's a great question. I can only share my experience, my strength and hope. So my experience, there was a gentleman that there was a mentor on the business side, but he was at a level that I was just starting off, selling coffee door to door, getting the rejections, the no's constantly. So for me to try to surround myself with mentors at the time, I didn't have the time. So I became a sponge to understand why people drink coffee, what they look for when they drink coffee, and understand the craft and understand the product and know everything about it so I could sell it. I didn't really have a lot of mentors. I mean, my mom, my dad, I mean, they were sounding boards. They weren't young entrepreneurs. As you know, I'm not a young entrepreneur anymore. They are. But I think the challenge I had is there's no coffee roaster in this town, and no one's going to share their playbook. They're not going to share, this is what I do and how I got here and what I got there. So for me, I just put my head down. I worked 80, 90 hours a week, and I just grind it out. Literally.
Literally. All right. And thank you for that. Thank you. Now let's go on down. Alexia, I have this question for you. You've been in business for years, and you said some of the same things as far as the challenge in El Paso, our location. And you're working to overcome some of those challenges. If someone came to you and they weren't necessarily wanting to start the same kind of business, a clothing business, designing business, but they were wanting to just start a business, what would be some pieces of advice that you would give them to be aware of, especially if they're going to start here in our community in the El Paso?
So definitely, I think it's very important to be well versed in all areas of business, and that would be marketing, advertising. You have to know, your books. What are your profits? What are your costs? It's not enough to just say, "Oh, I'm going to hire someone and they'll take care of it for me." You need to be behind the scenes in all of those areas and all of those aspects. And that's honestly how I think the businesses flourish, along with adding that personal touch. I think the small businesses have this advantage to where people want to feel connected with the business and know who's behind the brand, behind the company, so that it doesn't feel like it's just this big monster that, there's chains and franchises all over the place. That's something that's really beneficial. The importance of social media and marketing and finding out who your niche is in a very important part of the process. While I was in school, I had to study, the demographic here in El Paso as far as fashion and retail. Do these people who are shopping have children? Where do they work? It's just more so the research that goes into producing the product in the end, and you have to figure out what your selling point is going to be, and I think that establishes a very strong connection between the customer and the business owner and the consumer. So that's my piece of advice that I would give, is get very well versed in all areas of the business and figure out who your target market is going to be.
Thank you so much, and I agree. You've got to know. Sometimes if you don't have a target market, then the old expression is, if you aim at nothing, you're going to hit it. And so we've got to know who our target market is, and that's very insightful. I wish I had known that 40 years ago. I was selling something that nobody wanted, and they didn't even know what it was, and there was no way to do it. So I'm going to ask the Vintons this question. Based on that, and obviously marketing and business, just having business acumen is key. But talk to us a little bit about what you've done from the business side of things to make sure that you're meeting your P&L, that you're profitable, that you've got the right margins. What has been your approach to both to learn that as well as to ensure that you're making the money you need to make to stay in business, just from the business side of things, back office?
Yeah, so Iris had mentioned a couple things earlier, with the challenges of going from mobile to a brick and mortar, so more consistent inventory, the amount of inventory you have to keep on site at all times to ensure that you have stock all the time. And along with those things, it's really been figuring out, we had an idea of what people liked. And what was interesting for us is that we've operated in 3 different states. So when we first started, we operated in Tennessee, and some of the most popular plants in Tennessee were not the most popular in Albuquerque, where we were at before here. So, and same with El Paso. And so adapting to what our clients like is something that we're even still in the process of figuring out now, especially as we get into the holidays and we open back in April at our retail store. So really just using it. So we use Square as our retail platform. And so using that as a way to drive data has really been helpful, especially as we get into the holiday season and we have to ramp up our inventory, using that data that we've had over the last 3 or 4 months to really assess what's selling and what's not. And then if it's not, then, we slowly ramp down on those and ramp up in other areas. So really using the data from the last few months has been helpful. And then, in taking some challenges here and there too with certain things, like Iris mentioned, the large inventory pieces with living product can be a challenge. We have an 8-foot cactus right now in our shop that took, the better part of 2 months to get rid of because we thought it'd be a good idea at the time. And it's beautiful and everything, but, things like that, like, there's going to be some risk involved and some chances that you'll take, just based on your experience. But really learning from that previous data and having been mobile helped us in that regard.
I really appreciate what, Matt, you're saying there about the data. And about y'all, I took a statistics class 40 years ago, and I heard this statement, and I found it to be born true. Data, as he says it, data is how you're supposed to say it, by the way. Data should tell a story and result in an action. So if you're looking at data in whatever business you have, whatever data you're looking at, even if it's your own, if you're your competitors, whatever, what story is that data telling you? It should tell you something. If it's sales data, if it's clicks data on social media, data should tell a story. And the way you know if you're getting the right story or not is if you know what to do as a result of it. Based on the story it's telling us, what action should we take? And I think it's great that you're building a data-driven organization. I think that's wonderful. And that's a great thing. So let's shift to the human side of it for just a couple of moments. Additional comments, and then we'll be giving you a chance to ask some questions of our panel. And so if you're thinking of any, I'd encourage you to go and be writing those down now, and we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions in just a moment. But from the human side, we'll come back down to you, Stephen. You talked about just grinding it out. And so I hear that, and I understand what you're saying, but from your perspective, how do you not give up? And for people that, I know different personalities, or, you know, some people are just fighters, they just get in there and make it happen. Not everybody is built like that. So what, from your perspective and from your experience, what does it take to be able to stick it out? And what are some things maybe that you've done to keep from getting discouraged and giving up?
Great question. I'm highly motivated. I'm a competitor. I don't like to lose. So regardless of what we're doing or how we're going about it, I try to instill that in my team. Kind of the same thing as dangling the carrot, but now I'm able to pay it forward to them and take care of them to keep them around. In the beginning, it was, I couldn't keep anybody. I couldn't pay them what they wanted. Some of the challenges that we're having to this day, I don't think there's a special sauce for how to get motivated, how to stay motivated, and how to stay focused. For me, it was I've had discipline my entire life. I try to stay disciplined. The wife's she's a cath lab nurse, so she's on another level of OCD, and I see where she's at, and I'm way below that. But I just try to stay very motivated. There's a couple business owners that I talk to on a regular basis. They're motivated individuals. I'm having a bad day. We'll go have lunch. We'll stay connected. We'll talk about the good things, the bad things, staying on the side of being grateful, having gratitude. And then I just have a goal on where I want to be and what I want. And I don't let any of the naysayers, because from day one, banks told me no, families told me no. Everyone said, don't do it. And if you ask me if I was to start this all over again right now, I wouldn't do it. So I learned what not to do, but to get to where I'm at, to start it all over again, it's tough. So I just make sure that failure is not an option, and it's just it's a mindset.
I love it. Thank you. Alexia, I want to ask a question to you.
So I think the key to not getting discouraged is if you know from the very beginning, businesses are not easy to run. I think a big misconception that young business owners have is, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to work for myself. You're not. You're going to be in the hole or barely breaking even for at least the first couple of years. And if you know that from the very beginning, I think it makes it easier to kind of navigate the challenges that go with it. And that's how it is for retail. You have to make such a big investment in your product or in your team or in a physical location. So right now I have the advantage of I'm strictly e-commerce, so we're just online. But making an initial investment in product and inventory is put us in the hole, and as long as I feel that I have a plan and a strategy to market and advertise my clothing, I know that eventually we will get out of that hole and we'll start, becoming profitable. It's just a big misconception that I think a lot of people have. And I think as far as staying motivated, I always try and say yes. I said yes to speaking on this panel today, which I don't love public speaking, but it's something that I'm working on. I just got invited to do a fashion week here in El Paso. I'm going to say yes to that. So it's just a matter of putting yourself out there and saying yes to these opportunities to keep you motivated and on top of your work schedule.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you all the same question. Both of you can take it, or one of you can?
I would definitely agree with Alexia. A lot of it is just a mindset of going in with the right expectations. A big thing for us when we get stressed, some of you might know, we foster a lot of dogs, so we do a lot of community outreach. That has been a great way for us to just kind of stay motivated and know that we're doing this for a slightly larger cause, and we just really enjoy what we're doing despite like all the stress. This was the dream that we had. So every now and then when you're in those stressful moments, you just kind of have to take a pause and remind yourself that this is what you're working for, and it's always going to be an uphill battle.
Absolutely. And if many of you I know already have started businesses or in it, but if you're thinking of starting a business, you've just gotten some great advice. You've got to stick it out. I like what Steve said. If I knew what it was going to take, I wouldn't have done it, maybe. And I've been there too, but sometimes the reward is worth the payoff, and you can't go into it with just that pie-in-the-sky Pollyanna attitude. The three of you at the end of the table have no idea what that means, do you? I'll explain it to you later. But I just really dated myself. But you got to have a realistic approach to it and know that it's not going to be easy. But let me just say this too. It's not going to be easy. And, well, if I get bigger, it'll be easier. No, you'll just have bigger problems. Size doesn't make it necessarily easier. But the reality is, whatever it is, you can figure it out if you just keep doing it. I've lived long enough to know by now that if you get around the right people, ask the right questions, everything somehow always works out. Now, it may not work out the way I wanted it to or thought it would, but it always works out. And you've got to just have a realistic view that there's going to be some challenges, but if I don't give up, I don't quit, and I find out why I'm having the challenges, what's the cause, then you're going to be able to figure it out, fix it, and go on a lot faster. Now, in my experience, when I start looking for what is the cause, it's normally the guy whose face I shave every morning that's my biggest issue. And that is honestly the truth for a lot of us. It's ourself. I'm sure it's not with any of y'all, but it is with me. Now, I have one last thing I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to give you a moment to think about this, and that is there anything that you feel would be important for the audience to hear that you have either learned from someone else or through your own experience, and specifically that would help anybody here today, not just people who are young entrepreneurs starting businesses, and we're very impressed with what you're doing. Are there any thoughts about life or things that just keep you going? Maybe some mantras that you live by, something of that nature that would just be beneficial to the group. And we'll start at the other end of the table this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that we were just talking about earlier actually is just that I think if you're on the edge of wanting to start a business or you've been thinking about it for a long time, like that was something that connected Iris and I very early on in our relationship, is that we wanted to be business owners. We wanted to be our own bosses. That was the goal that we had from the beginning to work towards. But I think the biggest challenge is just taking that leap of faith in yourself. And I know it's easier said than done when there's a lot of other things than that take a business to be successful. But just having the courage to, trust yourself. If you feel that you believe in something strongly enough, you believe in yourself strongly enough, I think it'll work out as long as you have a good support system there as well. And that's the other thing too, is having a good support system, whether that's colleagues, whether that's family. It's definitely something that you can't do alone. And so using all those resources, as many as you have, is beneficial, I would say.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, ma'am, how about you, Lacey?
So I'm going to talk about funding. That's something that I'm sure everyone has the question is, where do I get the funding? And there's a lot of great resources here that are not, we don't know about them so often, but these organizations put together a lot of webinars and workshops so that you can take advantage of these resources. So there's one specifically for women. It's called the Amber Grant, and they give up to $30,000, I believe, per month to a different women-owned business in different categories. And at the end of the year, they give, I don't know if it's an additional $50,000. Don't quote me on that, but it's something definitely to look into. There's tons of grants out there that you can apply for that are specific to your industry or to your business. I think something also that I believe strongly in is education. Can you start a business without the education or the prior experience? Absolutely. But I do strongly believe in knowledge is power. And without the education that I would have received, I studied here at Community College, EPCC. So I had no idea that they had a fashion program there. And from there, I also received funding from something called, I don't know if they still offer it currently, but it was during the pandemic. It was called the ARPA grant. And they would give you $800 to $1,200 per semester, depending on how many courses you were enrolled in. So that's something that helped me out immensely during that time. So yeah, it's just saying yes to the seminars. The Hispanic Chamber and the Women's Business Border Center offer so many of these great resources that you should definitely look into. So here's my take.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. And I would encourage you, knowledge is power. And then do something with what you find out, right? The greatest power of knowledge is whenever knowledge is put into action. And in today's world, I don't know should never be an answer. Let me find out. Because there's always a way. There really is. There really is. All right, Stephen, same.
Let's talk about funding. I'm just kidding. I think
Borrow some money.
I know. You probably teach this, but for me, I learned something over time, and it's called the proximity principle. Does that ring a bell? You kind of alluded to it earlier, but when I first started, Miss Cindy over at the El Paso Hispanic started a group with Saucedo, Castro, and several others, and surrounded young entrepreneurs, put them together, network, and bounce ideas off. What are you doing here? How are you doing this? And I think for me, that's the biggest one. Surround myself with other people that are like-minded in the business. There's no one in El Paso that I'm aware of back then when we started that was roasting coffee. So there was no network in the same industry as I was, but there was other like-minded individuals that needed to understand the accounting side. She nailed it. You do need to know accounting, marketing, yada, yada, yada. At least understand it. So for me, it's surrounding myself with other like-minded individuals that have the same passion for growth and success.
And I would ask you this too, as a follow-up, Steve. How much of that circle, that proximity, having the right people around you, how much of that kept you motivated? How much of it helped you understand you weren't alone, you weren't the only one? Just talk about how it helped you in some ways, in some practical ways.
Yeah, it was big. I think in the beginning, there was no bank that would lend me money. Zero. So by surrounding myself with these other people, it allowed us to find answers to questions without having to spend money that you don't even have. So talking to Saucedo and his plethora of business knowledge, and Cindy and everybody else, it was, instead of spending time researching, figuring it out, you make a phone call, or you would meet once a week or once a month, and you could discuss, hey, what are you doing here? What are you doing for accounting? How are you doing this? And it kind of allowed, I wouldn't say to speed rail the business by any stretch, but it made it easier when you surround yourself with other individuals like that.
Absolutely. And if I could, one of the things that has helped me, Charlie Black's here, he and I've been working together for years, and he taught me this. He said, we all have different levels of competency, and the first place you start is unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. And you don't even know that you don't know. You just don't know. And when you start a business, there's things, oh, I have to do this, or, oh, I didn't know I really have to pay taxes every quarter. That's new. And there's things you just have no idea. And so you've got to go, the quicker you can get from that place of unconscious incompetence, where you don't know that you don't know and what you don't know, to that place of, and you go all the way around at least to conscious competence. I won't take the time to explain it all, but at least you've now have figured out, okay, you know what? There's some things that I am not really good at, but I need to know, I need to figure out, or I need to become proficient in. Once you get there, then it makes life a little bit easier. That's when you can develop the key skills that will help you to be more effective and efficient in business. But going from that unconscious incompetence, where you don't even know you're clueless, to that place of conscious competence, where at least it may not be a skill, but at least you know that there's some things you need to work on. The faster you can make that transition, the better. And by surrounding yourself with people who may be a little further down the road, or a like mind, like passion, it's going to be that old iron sharpened iron principle, I can assure you. Well, we're going to shift gears now. We're going to give you a chance to ask some questions to our panel. And so, do we have a mic, or how do they do that? Do we have a hot mic that they can use? They borrow one of these, okay? And so, if you have a question, if you'll just raise your hand for our panel, If you could do that, and we'll give you a minute to raise your hand, and we'll give you a chance to ask some questions. If you want to direct it to a specific member of our panel, please direct it specifically to them. If it's just a question in general, you can say that as well. We want to make sure that we give everybody a chance to ask some questions. All right, back in the back, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, this question is for Alexia. I know that you mentioned your clothing business and manufacturing, I believe you said in LA. I know the governor earlier was talking about El Paso being a strategic location, and then I know he mentioned, you know, Juarez. And by any chance, did you look into Juarez as your manufacturing partner? And if you did, do you have any insights you can share on that?
You know what? That was an option for me at one point. For me personally, I don't really go to Juarez that often, so it just wasn't as effective of a choice for me at that time. So, I mean, I did try New York, and I say New York and LA because they are more profound in the fashion industry. New York is the fashion capital of the United States, as opposed to like Milan, Paris, and all those other places. So there definitely is a lot more resources in those areas than here locally, even across the border. It probably would be more cost effective for me. I'm not sure if you're aware, but manufacturing in the US is very, very expensive. So it would have been definitely a great choice for cutting on costs, but for me at that time, it didn't work out. So.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Johan Navarro with Texas Quality Frontier. This question is for the entire panel. Some of the things they already mentioned may have provided some tactics or answers to this question, but do you guys have any advice for young entrepreneurs who are dividing their time and energy between a 9-to-5 and the startup of a small business?
So you're working a regular day job. You're trying to start a business on the side. Am I correct? All right. Anybody want to take that question? Have y'all had that experience? You want to take that question? Go ahead, Steve. You're going for the mic. Go, man.
No, I mean, I don't have any experience in that, but I think an option would be I would weigh out the 9-to-5 and the startup. Like, I got a lot of questions for you, but I'm not going to ask them. Well, what is it? How much money are you making? Blah, 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 right? I would weigh those things out in my mind to see when is the time to start going from a 9-to-5 to maybe a 9-to-3 to make it part-time, or give myself more time to work on the startup. For me, it was just all in, both feet, let's go. So that's not the greatest advice. I didn't have a family and kids at the time, so it was easier. Now it's a little bit different. But I would weigh out those two and look at, it all comes down to money, I mean, no one wants to talk about it. They want to keep it a secret. Profit's a bad word. It's not. I don't know if that's any advice, but I would just look at both of them and how passionate you are about the startup. And the question I would ask myself when I go to sleep is, how far are you willing to go to make the startup work?
That's a good question. Matt.
Yeah, so I mean, to piggyback off that, so I was working full time with our, at the time with our mobile shop up until we opened our retail store this past year. So it's challenging. There's no real easy answer that I have other than making sure that's what you want. And like Steven said, are you at the point where you can start transitioning from your job to your startup? And really for us, I mean, it was when we opened the retail store that I had decided to make that decision for myself to dedicate all my time to it. So it's a lot of hours, it's a lot of effort. Again, not a direct answer, but it's just a lot of work. And then, weighing those options when you're ready, or deciding when you're going to be ready, and then going from there.
Absolutely. And I would just add this too. People will tell you as a rule, and I know there's exceptions or anomalies all the time, but typically if you start a business, it's going to be harder than you think, it's going to cost more than you think, and it's going to take longer than you think. That's the reality of it. And that's not to discourage anybody. It is what it is, right? So you got to be willing to pay the price. But I would say this, one thing that might help is begin with the end in mind. I think Stephen was talking about what does rich look like, right? And so what is your ultimate goal? If you've got a side business or startup or something that's in addition to your regular job, is it something you're really passionate about? You don't care if you make money at it or not. That's fine. You can have that. That's called a hobby. I've got several of my children that think they have business. It's a hobby. I'm still funding it. It's a hobby that I'm paying for at this point, okay? And so, and I don't mean to be smart aleck about it. Well, maybe a little. But the idea is you've got to make sure what is your end goal. And I would always encourage you, be challenged and encouraged by the people who hit it rich, and in 3 years they were having to, buy more places and expanding. We just took on a new client in our business, and they were able to 100x grow their business by 100 in the millions. We're talking millions in 10 years. And it's a phenomenal business, and the head of the company is 35 years old. Now, if I'm starting a business today, I'm not going to say, okay, I'm going to go do the same thing, because that's the exception to the rule. That's not the rule. We want to be optimistic without losing sight of reality. But anyway, yes, back in the back, we've got another one.
Yeah, this question's for the whole panel. So with AI booming right now, I want to ask, are you using it or are you not using it?
I personally don't believe in AI. I just feel like it takes a lot of the creativity away from artists and designers. It only exists because of already pre-existing art that's been put out. Social media, big fan of. AI, not so much.
All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, so we use AI, but primarily just for social media, like content creation. So like if we need a caption for a post, we will kind of poorly articulate what we want in the narrative there, and then it generates the result that way. So that's really the only way we use it. Not really a lot of use for us otherwise besides that, but yeah, no, I mean, it's a scary time to be an artist with AI coming, and so in that regard, I'm not a fan of AI, but it does help when it comes to our social media narratives.
So this is how you and I know that we've been in prison together, because I'm going to be the only one on the panel that says that I love AI. We use it in tools all the time. Is it data or data? Data.
If you're from Texas, it's data. If you're from North Texas, who cares?
Data. All right. So for me, I mean, how cool would it be if you had a business where AI could produce, this is what the customer wants, this is where they want it, this is how they want it, and this is how you're going to deliver it to them. And all you have to do is produce the product. I'm all in. It makes it easier for me. Everything that we try to do has to be measured, because if it's not measured, it doesn't get done. So all the KPIs, the data for us, I stare at numbers all day long. And a lot of that stuff, that some of the software that we use is AI. And I think it makes the job easier, but I'm not in the art business. I mean, we do have an agricultural product. It's a living thing, so to speak, because it grew on a plant. It's the seed of a fruit. But yeah, I'm a fan.
So if you're going to sell drugs, then you should definitely use AI, is what I took away from Scott. Now, I will tell you, and I'm in AI, and I understand what
legal drugs.
Yeah, legal drugs. Sorry, I forgot about that part. That's where you and I differ. So the legal, and I understand what you're saying about the artistic piece. I would agree with that. But AI, whether y'all realize it or not, it's not something that just came out like a few years ago with ChatGPT. Different forms of AI has been around since the 50s. It's not new. It's been around a long time. Now, obviously, it's been proliferated in the market. And there are a number of things, and whoever asked that question, if you want to ask me some tips on how to leverage it for business, and I'm not talking about stealing people's creativity and those kinds of things. We have one client that we work with, a company we work with, and they've been able to repurpose 50 positions by using AI. And I'm not talking about procured AI, I'm talking about ChatGPT. And so there's great business applications, conversation we can have offline, but do agree. I would hate to see people's creativity be lost, and I think we're losing a lot because of technology, just in ability and skill. But I certainly understand that. We had another question right here.
Hi there, guys. Carolina Peralta with La Bella Fiore. My question is more in reference to the beginning for everybody. How do you navigate being a one-man band where you're trying to figure out marketing, finance, you're the inventory guy, you're taking the calls? Where do you direct your focus for growth? What is the important part that focus should be directed towards?
Go ahead.
So for me, I am my only employee. I work for myself and I do everything myself. I guess it just kind of comes from what kind of product you're putting out. More of your focus may need to be geared towards direct advertising if maybe you have a non-tangible product that's strictly online, or if you need to place your focus into manufacturing and creating this physical product that you're going to sell. I think it just depends on what kind of industry you're in. For me, the most important thing obviously is having physical clothing to be able to sell and make profit off of. So that's kind of where I've started from the beginning, was creating the product, and now my time has been more focused towards marketing, advertising, the more fancy stuff, photo shoots, all that kind of glamorous life that goes with fashion, but definitely the more technical stuff came before.
Go ahead, Steve.
Are you currently selling a product? Yes. So for us, the way that we look at it is called an MVP. So we throw doo-doo against the wall. So minimum viable product, we get it out there. And the first thing, if I'm you, and I'm the only person, there wasn't growth on my mind. It was nothing but survival. So I think the 5-letter word, is it 5 letters or 4 letters? Sales. That's all I focused on. Because I was surviving, beans and rice, ramen noodles, whatever. And then it was the more I sold, the more money came in. And then when there was money to put in an engine or in a tool that would help me grow, then I would start thinking about. In the beginning, it was just mostly survival.
All right. Any other question? Anybody else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Mauro with MRBD Enterprises, and my question's for Steven. When you started to wholesale and really scale your business, what were the hurdles really that you had to focus on in the beginning? How did you overcome them? And ultimately, what made you successful now to be able to scale so easily?
Thanks for the kind words. I don't think we're successful yet, but we're trying to work there, so I appreciate that. On the wholesale side, when you're a small business, no one wants to deal with small business. This is from my experience. It's because my product won't be as cheap as they have in terms of expectations. Expectations get you all the time. So I couldn't match the pricing from a national contractor, and I couldn't buy any of my products in bulk or an economy of scale because I can only afford 5 or 10 boxes. So for us to grow the wholesale, it was put on the sales hat and go get the customers. Kind of, it'll be a short story, but it's not a long, and I don't want to like talk about brands, but I think I have to. So there's a restaurant called Village Inn. I'm sure everyone knows who they are. And it took me 3 years to sit at the round table with those fine young men that run that business. Don't give up. Ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that. All right. Have we got one more or not? If not, let me just, I'd like to just kind of wrap this up if I could real quick. And thank you all. Let's give our panelists one more round of applause if we could very quickly. And we do want to appreciate them. And thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you as somebody who's got more time behind him than he does ahead of him, me and Steven. And for all that you've done. Steven, the first time I ever went into the 210 Roaster was one on Montana, quite a while back. And now, is that where you started or no? This was a long time ago.
No, we started in Anthony, right across from Latina. That's where we met.
Okay.
There was a warehouse, and that's where I started roasting coffee. But then we lost it all back in 2010
Okay.
because there was a warehouse fire.
I remember.
It had nothing to do with us, even though we roast coffee.
Yeah, even though we're into drugs.
Yeah.
That was a meth lab at that time. Then we got into seriously though.
No, none of that. And then it was just, we lost it all. We had to start all over. So, yeah, we're on Donovan, but no, we started over there.
All right. I went into the one on Montana, I think was the first time, with a friend of mine from high school. We hadn't connected. We went in there and I looked around and I thought, is this going to make it? And obviously it has. And so that says a lot. And I would just want to also thank you for being willing to take a step that is uncertain and to kind of step out and kind of see what happens. I'm convinced that small business and that pioneer spirit is one of the things that help make our entire country great. And I believe having young people that are willing to take the risk and go for it and figure it out and fight it out and just grind it out is what's going to keep our country great. So if you could give our panelists one more time a round of applause, we'll thank them for that. We're going to turn it over to Mike.